Robert Redford has always been a man of few words when it comes to his personal life. But at 89, when asked about the one person who truly understood him, he didn't hesitate. His voice softened, his eyes drifted to memory, and he said a name that still echoes in Hollywood's heart: Paul Newman. Their friendship was something Hollywood had rarely seen, not built on fame or fortune, but on trust, humor, and mutual respect. They weren't just co-stars in a few films, they were brothers in spirit, bound by a connection that lasted decades, even after Newman's passing. When they first met in the late 1960s, Redford was the younger, rising actor, still finding his ground. Newman was already a superstar, admired for his cool confidence and effortless charm. Many expected competition, perhaps jealousy. But instead, something extraordinary happened. They clicked instantly. Redford once recalled that Newman treated him like an equal from day one. There was no ego, no Hollywood posturing. Newman's wit was sharp, but never cruel. He loved teasing Redford, especially about his hair, and Redford would fire back with jokes about Newman's famous blue eyes. Their banter became the soul of their friendship. When they made Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid in 1969, their chemistry was so real that audiences believed it had to be more than acting. Redford later said, "We didn't need to rehearse much. We trusted each other's rhythm." That trust became their trademark. Every scene they shared glowed with authenticity, built on laughter and deep respect. Off-screen, they were even closer. They spent long nights talking about life, family, and fame, things that both men were still trying to make sense of. Newman had already faced the glare of Hollywood spotlight for years, but Redford was just entering it. Newman quietly became his mentor, teaching him how to stay grounded while the world tried to pull him in every direction. It wasn't advice from a pedestal, it was wisdom shared over drinks, jokes, and the occasional quiet silence. Newman believed that fame could destroy a person if they started believing in their own myth. Redford never forgot that. He often said Newman saved him from becoming the kind of man Hollywood wanted him to be, instead of the man he really was. Behind the scenes, both men were rebels in their own way. They didn't play by Hollywood's rules. They cared more about the craft than the glitz. When studios demanded control, they pushed back. When the industry tried to pit them against each other, they laughed it off. Their next film together, The Sting, 1973, proved their partnership wasn't a fluke. The film became one of the biggest hits of the decade, winning 7 Academy Awards. But even at the height of their fame, Redford and Newman remained humble. Newman often joked that the real reason The Sting worked was because Bob finally learned to follow my lead. Redford would grin and reply, "You mean I made you look good again?" They were opposites in many ways. Newman loved fast cars and racetracks, Redford loved solitude and the mountains. Newman was outspoken and socially active, Redford was private and reflective. Yet those differences strengthened their bond. They balanced each other out, filling the gaps that fame and time created. Their friendship wasn't about being seen together at parties or premieres. It was about trust, the kind that doesn't fade with distance or success. When Newman started his famous charity, Newman's Own, Redford quietly supported him behind the scenes. When Redford founded the Sundance Institute, Newman was one of his earliest backers. They believed in each other's dreams without needing credit or attention. In interviews, Redford often said that Newman represented the kind of man he wanted to be: generous, fearless, and loyal. And Newman once said that Redford was the only person who could make him laugh when everything else felt heavy. Their bond was more than friendship. It was a quiet brotherhood that stood the test of time. But even the strongest friendships face moments of silence. As they grew older, life naturally pulled them in different directions. Their careers evolved, their families expanded, and their health began to change. Yet every time they reunited, it was as if no time had passed. Redford said, "We didn't need to talk about the years apart. We just picked up where we left off." When Paul Newman was diagnosed with cancer, Redford struggled to process it. He wasn't ready to lose his closest friend. He called Newman often, trying to keep their conversations light. But deep down, both men knew they were approaching the end of a chapter they'd written together over 4 decades. In 2008, when Paul Newman passed away, Redford stayed silent for months. He couldn't find the words to speak about a man who had meant so much. Eventually, when he did, his statement was brief but heartfelt: "There's a hole in my heart now, and I don't think it will ever be filled. The world saw two movie icons. But Redford saw something deeper, a man who gave him laughter, courage, and a sense of belonging in an industry that often feels lonely. Their friendship wasn't scripted. It was real, raw, and rare. Even decades later, Redford still talks about Newman as if he's just stepped out of the room. He once said, "I still hear his voice when I look at a project or face a problem. He's still here, just in a different way." That kind of love, between two friends who shared so much, never really dies. Theirs was a friendship built not on fame, but on faith. Two men who saw through the glamour, who stood by each other when the world tried to pull them apart. And now, at 89, Redford carries that bond quietly, like a cherished photograph tucked deep inside his heart. Robert Redford once said that when you lose someone who was part of your foundation, the world feels off balance. That's how it was when Paul Newman passed away. For Redford, it wasn't just the loss of a co-star, it was the loss of his mirror, his friend, and the man who made Hollywood feel like home. In the years following Newman's death, Redford avoided interviews about their friendship. Every question brought back memories he wasn't ready to face. But as time went on, he began to see the beauty in sharing those memories, not to dwell in sadness, but to honor the joy they created together. At 90, Redford finally spoke more openly about his bond with Newman. He revealed that their friendship wasn't always easy, they argued, disagreed, and occasionally went months without talking. But underneath it all was a deep respect that never faded. "We didn't need to agree," Redford said. "We just needed to understand each other." He also spoke about how Hollywood often misunderstood them. Some people thought they were rivals, others believed their connection was purely professional. But those who knew them well understood it was genuine. They didn't need to prove their friendship to anyone, they simply lived it. Redford admitted that Newman taught him more about generosity than anyone else. Newman's philanthropy inspired him to use his fame for good. Redford carried that spirit into the Sundance Institute, which became a home for independent filmmakers who might never have had a voice otherwise. Newman, in turn, admired Redford's courage, the way he built an empire around art, not ego. Both men quietly changed Hollywood without ever trying to. They made it okay for stars to care about more than box office numbers. They made it cool to have integrity. Redford still remembers the last time he saw Newman. It wasn't glamorous or emotional, it was simple, like most of their moments together. They sat outside, talking about old times, laughing about the absurdity of fame, and recalling the early days when no one believed Butch Cassidy would work. Newman had that familiar sparkle in his eye, and Redford knew it might be their last conversation. When Newman said goodbye, Redford described feeling a strange calm, as if his friend was reassuring him that everything would be all right. That final exchange stayed with him for the rest of his life. Over the years, Redford has continued to honor Newman quietly. He attends events for Newman's charities, visits his family, and speaks warmly of him whenever asked. But what stands out most is the humility in his words. "He made the world better," Redford once said. "And I was lucky enough to witness it up close." There's a reason why audiences still talk about their friendship decades later. It wasn't just about two actors, it was about two souls who found each other in a world full of illusions. They became symbols of loyalty